What's going on, y'all? Today I'm very excited to give you guys a comparison between the Nike Vomero 18, which has been one of my favorite running shoes to run in just for, daily runs, long runs, easy runs, and whatnot, versus the brand new Nike Vomero Plus, which I just did a full review on, which I honestly really love this shoe as well. And as a consumer, having both of these options at our disposal, one price at $155 versus $180, I wanted to make this video for those of you guys deciding between these two shoes. So let's get right into it. So before I get into this comparison, sorry for the sweat and all that. I literally just ran and it's pretty hot right now in Southern California, but we're gonna get right into the review, starting with the outsoles of both of these shoes. So as you can see, both of these shoes utilize Nike's waffle sole pattern, just in different outsole patterns. As you can see, the Vomero 18s on my left right here, they have a different waffle pattern, maybe less nubs and just a different formation of them, versus the Vomero Plus has a little bit more coverage throughout the whole outsole, if you guys are able to see that quite well. And from a traction point of view, both of these outsoles were solid. Now, I do want to preface this by saying that I typically run in only sunny conditions. The worst roads that I typically run on are just roads with a little bit of sand on them, so I slip honestly with every shoe. And both of these outsoles, from a traction point of view, definitely performed around the same. If I had to give a slight edge to one shoe over the other, I would give it to the Vomero Plus. And my hypothesis is just because the nubs are a little bit closer together. I don't know if that provides a little bit more coverage in different directions, as well as just running straight forward. But I did feel that the Vomero Plus stuck to the ground just slightly better. I wouldn't say it's substantial, like this one is gonna stick like glue in the rain or in the snow versus this one. I think that both of them performed pretty well in pretty ideal weather conditions. So if you're looking for a review that kind of tested these shoes in worse conditions, maybe in the rain or snow or on the trails, unfortunately, this probably isn't the comparison for you, as I live in Southern California. But overall, traction on both of these was definitely on par. I think that you can't go wrong with either of these as long as you run in fairly good weather conditions. But if I had to give a slight edge for traction, I would say go with the Vomero Plus. As for durability of both of these shoes and the outsoles, how are they holding up? The Vomero 18s, I do have a lot more mileage on. I believe I'm around 80 miles in this shoe versus the Vomero Pluses. I'm at around 45 to 50 miles in this shoe, and honestly, it's really hard to tell how both of these outsoles are holding up. I would say that I do see some degradation on the Vomero 18's outsole. It is starting to get a little bit worn down, but that's to be expected with 80 miles on the shoe, especially at my weight of 200 pounds. I do feel like this is typically normal, and I do also think that both of these outsoles, the waffle lugs or the rubber compound that Nike uses on both of them, is on the softer side. They both have a decent amount of thickness when it comes to the outsole, so I do think that they both will last an average amount of time. But again, if I had to give an edge for maybe durability, and this is just a hypothesis, I would say that I would think that the Vomero Plus will last maybe a smidge longer than the Vomero 18. I just think that due to the more waffle lugs as well as the outsole thickness, I do think that the Vomero Plus just has a slight edge over the Vomero 18. But again, that's probably not 100% valid. That's just what I think of both of these shoes and having both of them in hand. So when it comes to outsoles, I think that both of them are around the same. If I had to give a slight edge, again, I think the Vomero Plus's outsole is slightly better than the Vomero 18, but honestly, nothing to write home about. And I don't know if you would make a decision just strictly based off of the outsole. Now, moving on to the main event, which is the cushion setup of both of these shoes. I think that this is the biggest differentiation between these two shoes, and I'm really excited to talk about my experience in both of the setups. So starting out with the Vomero 18, apparently I've seen a little bit of mixed specs online. I believe it is a 46mm stack height in the heel, dropping to a 36mm stack height in the forefoot. You get a top layer of Nike Zoom X and a bottom layer of React X. No plate in either of these shoes, and overall the Vomero 18s felt amazing. I really, really enjoyed this shoe, and it honestly surprised me when I first picked up the shoe. I think that the shoe has a great amount of impact protection. It kind of gives you that max cushion feel while still remaining low to the ground and low enough where I feel like you can still wear this as a daily trainer and put in a lot of work in a lot of different paces. It is maybe on the slightly bulkier side of things when you're considering this as a daily trainer, whereas if you consider it a max cushion shoe, it's definitely more of a minimal max cushion shoe. The reason I say minimal is because to me, in the forefoot paired with this rocker, I feel like the forefoot is actually pretty thin. I've seen some stuff online that the actual measured heel to toe drop in the shoe is around 14 millimeters, and I do feel that the forefoot is probably not 36 millimeters just by a feel of, you know, running in so many different running shoes. It definitely feels a little bit less than 36 millimeters in the forefoot, and you get a good amount of ground feel. Now, what does all this mean? I think that you're getting a great amount of impact protection, as well as you're not getting slowed down by the foam because there is that forefoot feel in the forefoot. The heel also doesn't feel too squishy and too high off the ground. So stability wise, also, I think that this shoe is decent for a higher stack shoe. So overall, this setup is pretty versatile in my opinion. I obviously wouldn't run a 5K PR or a 10K PR in this shoe, but if you do want to pick up the pace up until half marathon pace or maybe marathon pace, this shoe is actually going to do it for you. And you can take this shoe on long runs, especially for what's quote unquote a daily trainer or a quote unquote max cushion shoe. I wouldn't necessarily run a lot of long runs in those types of shoes, but this shoe can kind of do both, which is the reason why I really like it. The React X makes it a little bit more stable too when it comes to a stability point of view. And I honestly think that the high stack height is a little bit of a cap. I think that it's not as high as maybe the specs say it is, and it doesn't feel too high off the ground, which I personally think is a good thing when it comes to ground feel and stability. So overall, the Vomero 18 setup is very, very good with that React X and Zoom X combination. Let's talk about the Vomero Plus. So apparently online, I've seen some specs that this shoe is 1 millimeter lower than the Vomero 18. Don't exactly know if that's true or not, because I do feel like there's more cushion underfoot in the Vomero Plus. Like if you just look at the midsoles, it's kind of hard to see this one because it's a monochromatic colorway, but you can kind of see that the midsole looks a little bit taller, especially in the forefoot of both of these shoes. And it definitely feels that way. Obviously, like sometimes with these higher stack shoes, a lot of the times the midsole is just on the outside and it's more of like a sidewall instead of cushion that's actually under your foot. But in this case, I can kind of confirm from my personal experience, I definitely feel a little bit higher off the ground in the Vomero Plus. And even though technically on paper, this is a 45 millimeter heel, 35 millimeter forefoot, I do feel like under the forefoot as well as under the heel, I definitely feel a lot more foam than in the Vomero 18. Now, I do say this with a caveat that it could be I've already compressed the foam in the Vomero 18s, but I'm also pretty sure that when I first had the Vomero 18s, it didn't feel that high off the ground either. So I'm putting that out there. Let me know in the comment section down below if you have both of these shoes or if you have one or the other and can confirm my experience in the shoes. So 45 millimeters to 35 millimeters of stack in the Nike Vomero Plus, and this is actually a full length, fully Zoom X midsole. I don't exactly know if it's the race foam. I don't believe it is from some of the comments in my full review as well as my first run review in these. But overall, this setup felt amazing. I think that if I had to nitpick on one thing of this shoe or this setup is that maybe the stability isn't as good as the Vomero 18s, but overall the midsole was just super comfortable. I would say also if I were to nitpick, maybe there isn't as much ground feel in the forefoot. So that's maybe a personal preference if you prefer ground feel in the forefoot of your shoes. But overall, I really like this shoe for long runs. I really like them for recovery runs, easy runs. Faster runs, maybe not so much because it is a bigger shoe, just like the Vomero 18 is. I would rather have a lighter weight shoe or a more bouncy shoe for a speedier run. But basically for every other run, especially up until, you know, half marathon pace, this shoe is going to be able to handle it with this setup. It has a great amount of impact protection. It's softer when you're running a little bit slower, and it firms up and kind of gets a little bit more stable the faster you run, as long as you don't severely overpronate or supinate. And overall, I can't really complain about this setup. It's kind of not super, super bouncy, but it does give a little bit of response, and it does have that plush underfoot feel that I personally really like as a heavier runner. And I just feel like the setup is just super, super versatile, and it's one of the reasons why I really love the Vomero Plus. I think that, you know, besides the Super Blast 2, there wasn't really a shoe for me personally that I really liked that was non-plated, had super foam, had a really high stack height, and a lot of impact protection until this shoe. I didn't really like the Nike Invincible 3s because it didn't really lock my heel in. So when this shoe came out, I was really excited to try it out. Again, I honestly didn't think that it could get much better than the Vomero 18, but it definitely did with the Vomero Plus, especially when it comes to the cushion setup. So I think with Nike's lineup, it did make sense to kind of make the Vomero Plus when the Vomero 18 was still a really good setup, but they definitely enhanced the quality of materials, the feel underfoot, and they gave you a little bit more stack height. Again, that's not 100% confirmed, but just from my feel, I definitely feel like you get more stack height in the Nike Vomero Plus. So overall, I'm gonna have to give the edge or the big win, honestly, to the Vomero Plus. I just really love the setup. Not to say that the Vomero 18 setup is bad, but when you do have both of these shoes kind of in hand and you're running in both of these, I think I just gravitate towards the Vomero Plus's feel. But yeah, the Vomero 18 definitely has a more daily trainer-esque feel. This one definitely feels like a bigger and more of a quote-unquote super shoe feel versus I think this shoe is more chill. It's more like a daily trainer that's really, really premium and really good in my opinion. So overall, I think that you can't go wrong with either of them. I just personally prefer the Vomero Plus's setup a little bit more. Now, last but not least, we're gonna talk about upper and fit. Both of these, honestly, in my opinion, run true to size. I technically wear a US men's size 12, and I have a slightly wider than average foot, and both of these shoes accommodated my foot very, very well. Heel lockdown on both of these shoes are also very, very good. I did do the runner's loop in both of these shoes, so I do want to put that out there. If you guys put the runner's loop, I think that your heels will be locked in, as well as if you go true to size, you will be locked in. When it comes to fit, I do think that the Vomero Pluses fit my foot just a tad better. I think that the materials used also on the Vomero Plus's upper, I just personally prefer a little bit more than the Vomero 18s. Now, again, not to say that the Vomero 18s upper and fit aren't good. I think that they are very solid in this shoe, but I think that the materials are a little bit lighter weight, a little bit thinner on the Vomero Plus, which I personally really like, especially on such a big shoe. It really reduces the weight and feel of the shoe versus the Vomero 18 is more of a traditional mesh setup. Nothing wrong, again, with a traditional mesh. I love mesh more than the next person. So I just think that from a feel point of view, I did feel like there was a touch more volume in the forefoot of the Vomero 18, which is definitely not a bad thing, especially on long runs when your feet expand. But I just felt like overall the fit of the Vomero Plus was a little bit more streamlined than the Vomero 18s. But Vomero 18 still fit fantastic. The support was great. Lockdown and everything was great. I would say that it's a dual layered mesh, so ventilation, I didn't really feel in the shoe, if I'm being completely honest. Same with the Vomero Plus, even though it's a thinner upper on this shoe, I didn't really feel like too much ventilation in either of these shoes. So if you live in a really hot or humid area, or you get a lot of blisters, or you need a lot of airflow, I don't think that either of these shoes are gonna be good to go. But if you're looking for a good upper, good fit, both of these shoes are gonna take care of you well. I just think that the Vomero Plus definitely feels a little bit more premium and a little bit more lightweight on foot than the Vomero 18. And personally, it just fits my foot just slightly better. But with all that being said, both of these shoes are going to take care of you just fine. Heel lockdown is really good. If I were to complain on both of these shoes uppers, I do think that there's a little bit too much padding in the heel collar, as well as the tongue is just ginormous for, I guess, no reason. I also don't personally really like the lace loops on either of these. They just kind of remind me a little bit of some old basketball shoes I used to have that actually the eyelets broke when they were these little strings. So only time will tell for that part. So I'm not exactly sure. But overall, if I had to give a win to an upper of both of these shoes, I would say that the Vomero Plus definitely edges out the Vomero 18. But that's kind of to be expected also with the increase in price. So overall, comparing these two shoes, Vomero 18 priced at $155 now. It used to be $150. I got my pair for $150 before the tariffs and everything. And then the price of the Vomero Plus at $180. So there's a $25 price difference. And actually, this is the one time or very few times where I will recommend the more expensive shoe over the, I guess, more budget, kind of $155, not really budget, but between these two shoes, I definitely think that objectively the Vomero Plus is an upgrade and definitely is a better shoe. But what I would recommend the Vomero 18 for is if you're kind of in the market for an in-between shoe of like a max cushion shoe and a daily trainer, especially for bigger runners like myself. Like if I had to pick one shoe to kind of start running in, as well as I wanted a comfortable shoe to walk in, and I wanted to run a half marathon and whatnot, and maybe even train for a full marathon, I think that the Vomero 18 covers a lot of those categories, priced at $155. It's not going to feel like the most premium upper that you're ever going to put on your foot, but it's definitely going to get the job done. The cushion setup is still amazing. I would say that it feels a little bit softer than the Vomero Pluses, and you do get a lot of ground feel, which I think as a beginner runner too, or just as someone who prefers ground feel, I think that that's going to be a selling point, as well as just the setup is pretty versatile in of itself. The outsole is definitely solid. I just think that for $155, there's not a lot of shoes on the market that can beat the Vomero 18s at basically everything at. But when we go up to the price of $180, an extra $25, I do think that if you're looking for a max cushion shoe, or you're looking for a shoe that has a super foam as well as you can take on long runs, you don't mind a little bit of extra heft, because I do know that these are heavier than the Superblast 2s, even though for such a big shoe, I do feel like this is a pretty lightweight shoe. Then you are gonna wanna invest maybe the extra $25 into this Vomero Plus, because I personally do think that compared to a lot of other $200 shoes on the market, this one can definitely hold its own. I personally think it's one of the favorites in my collection already, and I can't really take my feet out of these. I always think about wearing these when I am going on a run. Definitely consider these shoes if your budget kind of allows you to. For $180, I think that this can be a fantastic long run shoe. I think that you can also pair these two together. Use this as your daily trainer, use this as your long run, and basically you'll be max cushioned out. Or you can maybe go with a Nike Pegasus 41 and a Vomero Plus. That could be a really good marathon training rotation. There's just a lot of possibilities with these shoes, and I do think that Nike actually did a good job at differentiating both of these models. There is definitely a difference in performance, as well as I do think that for the price upgrade, I do think that this is definitely a more premium and more exciting shoe to run in. Which is actually surprising to say, because I really, really love the Vomero 18. So that's gonna pretty much wrap up my comparison video on both of these shoes. Let me know in the comment section down below which one you prefer. Maybe you prefer the look of, maybe you prefer the specs of, the ground feel, whatever it is. If you have either one of these shoes or both of these shoes, I'd be really curious to get your thoughts down below. If you're really looking into buying either of these shoes, honestly, I don't think you can go wrong with either of them. These two shoes are honestly some of my favorite shoes of this year, which is crazy to say, because not only are they from the same brand Nike, but they're from the same family line too. So it's kind of like interesting in my head. I'm like, dang, like, I don't know, Nike's just killing it with the Vomero line. So I am really curious to try out the Vomero Premiums, and that one is gonna be even heavier. That one's a chunky monkey. So with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. I am gonna compare these to the Superblast 2s next, because those are another one of my favorite non-plated super trainer shoes. That's also really expensive, but I'd be curious to see how these stack up against those shoes. Let me know in the comment section down below if you're excited for that as well, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.